Hi, it's Mark Bernard here from the Bernard Institute for Cybersecurity Excellence. And today I'm here to talk about annual budgeting and planning cycles. If you want to be a top-notch leader for your cybersecurity program, whether you're a CISO title or otherwise, then you need to understand that there's a certain cycle that goes on every year, and you need to be part of that process because getting an approved budget means that you actually have a real program. And living off somebody else's budget in your organization, not so much. So without further ado, let's jump into the presentation here. Okay, so an annual business plan is so important because every company goes through this process where they set goals for the organization or they review goals from the previous year to make sure that they're still on track and it's lined up with the mission, of course. And then they talk about what is it that we hope to achieve from these goals? So how will we get there? What is the desired outcome? And how do we measure success? So if we're a $1 trillion company, if we make annual revenue increase by 10%, is that a good goal? If we have fewer customer complaints, and our products are better and we have fewer returns, so we have to supply less. There's a number of different metrics that you can look at. And certainly within the cybersecurity program, there's a number of metrics. Measured targets. We need to set some goals. So key performance indicators and the strategies to drive toward those key performance indicators. And then the results of that process. So this, if you've been a CIO or a CTO or you're an executive, of course, you've been involved in these processes probably. Sometimes some companies have an annual retreat where they take all the executives away from their busy work and their busy lives and for a week or a few days, and then they just focus on the strategic plan and how it's going and what they need to do to change it. So this is all part of the organizational, the enterprise business plan. Now, the cybersecurity business plan also needs to exist. So each of the portfolio owners or each of the executives on the executive team have their own business plans that feed into the corporate plan and demonstrate how they're going to support the program. This is a table of contents as an example of a strategic and tactical business plan for cybersecurity. So you can see it provides an outline of the company and what it's designed to do. So most companies are not created to provide cybersecurity services. There are some out there. Of course, there are many cybersecurity companies. But if you're within a bigger company, like an insurance company or a bank or a government or a pharmaceutical, you're not there to build security. You're there. Security helps provide assurance. So you need to put the company profile on what they actually do in the first part of the business plan. And then in the next section, you want to talk about the governance process. So how does the information security program or the cybersecurity program work? How does the governance within that program work? Usually I create a terms of reference, defines who's on the team and what the roles are, the inputs, outputs. We also need to have a vision for the cybersecurity program and some strategic goals and objectives. And then we need to talk about how we're going to support it. So how do the goals and the objectives of the cybersecurity program support the overall enterprise? Okay, so you need to define that. Then you need to talk about how we support the products or the services of that company as well. And of course, we need to set some milestones and from that some budget. So we're going to get into those details and how that is quantified and calculated in a few minutes here. Okay, cybersecurity success factors. Okay, so critical success factors. So what are the most important things that need to be in place in order for the program to function? So there's a list of things, maybe could be 5 things, could be 20 things. There's a number of things that need to be in place so the cybersecurity can operate. So for instance, you need to have resources and you should have a budget of your own. That's one of the things. Also, the key performance indicators I mentioned a few times now. So these are very interesting. Here's a wide selection. There's 6 different sections here that you could grab one KPI out of each of these and use and measure each one. You have to keep the KPIs for at least a year in order to see if it's effective. You can't just swap them out every time you have a report, because if you do, then it's pretty meaningless, to be honest with you. So you can have KPIs for strategic alignment with the organization. Remember, we talked about the companies in business to provide some kind of a product or service. Maybe they build cars, windmills. Well, how does the cybersecurity program support that? The risk management side, how do we manage risk? Okay, what's the success of managing risk? Is it because we have no incidents, no cybersecurity breaches? Okay, that's a good measurement. There may be a number of different ways to look at that. Business process assurance. So we need to provide assurance to our customers, to regulators. So how are we doing on that? Do we, fill in surveys on a regular basis? Do we answer questionnaires for our customers? We can measure that, right? The value of delivery. So when we, how do we reduce maybe the errors in a product or a service to avoid any kind of breach or any kind of assurance question or any kind of regulatory inquiry or audit. Resource management, we need to talk about how our resources are managed and also finally the performance overall of the program. And then we get into risk management, and again, we talk about the risks and how we calculate risks and what the service levels are and the incident handling part of that. It's all integrated, really. Continual improvement is also a very important part because that's where a lot of the capital expenditures come from. And there's really, two angles to look at the budget, so we're going to talk about that too. And then, of course, there's business communications, and then there's awareness training and document and record management as the evidence of the program. And then, of course, internal audit to provide independent, objective assurance over the program. Okay, so within the cybersecurity program, usually we have it's a 3-year cycle. It's a 3-year plan on a 3-year cycle, but we review it every annual, and we might even review it every quarter, right? Just to make sure that it's working properly. So a strategic plan begins usually 3 months before the end of that cycle. And that cycle is usually on a fiscal year. It's called a fiscal year. It's usually on the end of the year. Could be December 30th, could be the last day, or it could be June 30th. So it depends on the organization and how the chief financial officer runs the operation. Okay, management needs to monitor the process quarterly. So they look at those KPIs that we talked about to make sure that, because they act like guide rails, they make sure that the train is going in the right direction. And if the train is deviating or there's any kind of vibrations on the train, they want to be able to resolve those and fix those. So management monitoring is very important. Quarterly is a good idea. So here's a very brief summary of what you would go through in year one when you're setting up a cybersecurity program. So first of all, you would build the plan, and the plan would consist of a gap assessment. And the gap assessment is based on what are the standard procedures. So most of the cybersecurity programs that I build, or GRC programs, they have 7 procedures in them. So they have governance, risk management, internal audit, they have continual improvement, they have awareness training, business communications, and then they have some kind of records keeping activity. So there's at least 7 processes. There can be more or less depending on your organization and how you sell this to the organization. Okay, and then there's input from any type of audits or risk assessments that have happened throughout the year. So I would suggest that if you're a brand new CISO and this is a brand new program, that you probably want to go back 2 years, maybe 3, and see what has happened on the audit side to see if things are getting shut down or if there's some dangling deliverables and risks out there that we need to address. And risk assessments get conducted hopefully on a regular basis, but it might be something new to the organization. So that's something that's probably going to develop and evolve over the next 3 years. Corrective and preventive action plans. This is a quality management system kind of approach to think about because if we document things from a quality management perspective, it's much clearer for managers because they understand continual improvement. They understand corrective and preventive action plans. So it's a good way to begin the process of documenting the project. Now, the project charter, if you have a PMO, a formal PMO, probably the project charter is the one document that needs to be defined and created and published to the PMO in order to get their approval. And once you get their approval, then you may already have executive management approval, or you may have to go there next. From this, you can create a budget because in the project charter, you're going to talk about things like resource planning, skills that are required, the duration of the project, and you can tack on some costs to that. So you can come up with an estimate on the actual projects. And then you have a new budget. The new budget would also contain, so the projects would be capital expenditures. Operational expenditures would be part of the program and the gap assessment up here that would evolve. So you'd have to have an idea of how many resources you're going to need for your program. And in addition to that, how many resources do you need for projects? Then you have a draft of the strategic plan. Next step is to get it approved by the executive team. So the CFO and the CEO will play a key role. They are key stakeholders. You may also have other senior executives also playing a role in that process. And then once that's done, it may go to the board for final approval, okay, as part of the overall corporate approach. Now, in the second year or subsequent years following that initial plan, you're going to be revising things. So it gets easier. So once you have the framework in place, now all you have to do is go in and update it. And that's much easier than actually understanding and knowing how to create a plan from scratch. But I would suggest that any cybersecurity leader should know these things, right? So you have to revise the plan. You have to update any policies, procedures, or any sort of activities that are going on. You also have to revise the budget because there'll be new projects. So old projects hopefully got finished in the last fiscal. If not, and they're carrying it forward, or you need new money for that, then you might bring those back into the budget. And then revise any sort of existing strategic plan. Okay, so as I mentioned before, some fiscal years end on December 30th, some on June 30th. So you have to find out. This is really important. It's so important. I can't explain to you the difference between a mature cybersecurity program, one that has a budget approved for operations and for capital expenditures, is a thing of beauty. Fly by the seat of your pants and use somebody else's budget is almost going to always create trouble for the cybersecurity program, just simply because you're just not in control. Somebody else is in control, and there could be competing interests. There could be a lot of issues that come up where you won't have any money to fix a problem or resolve a risk. It'll have to always get escalated to the CEO or the board, and that's not a good way to run a program. Okay, so generally we found that most operational budgets are about 8 to 15% of the IT budget. And why do we say that? It's because a lot of things that IT does are really security related. So if you think about access and identity management, vulnerability management, you think about patching firewalls or any of the peripheral devices, and the true intrusion detection systems or the ASAs. There's a lot of different things, the McAfees, the endpoint protection systems. All of these things are all security focused and related. So a lot of that adds up. So around between 8 and 15%. This number is a number that's been reviewed over 13 years of surveys that came from a U.S. company. No longer in business. They got bought and shut down, but we still use these numbers as sort of a baseline because this is the reality of it. Capital improvement projects require a resource plan, so you know how many bodies you need, how many skilled laborers you need, if there's any types of acquisitions that need to be part of that. So maybe you have to do an RFP as part of that process, and any other type of purchases. So maybe you have to buy some software, maybe you need some new equipment. Again, maybe more RFPs are required. So these are all capital improvement projects. So these are the two big components of the budget, really. So cybersecurity budgets again are 8 to 15%, and then there's the capital expenditure part of the budget. Now, let's take a look at a typical operations scenario. Let's say you're following the NIST cybersecurity framework. Okay, so identify is the first step. You want to do a review, gap assessment, risk assessment. You want to identify what the assets are. You need a scope. There's a lot of details that go into that in order to identify fully all the assets that are in scope and be able to risk assess them. And then the next step is to protect those assets. So probably you already have a lot of controls in place to manage the risk. And maybe through the risk assessment, you identify some opportunities for improvement on some of those controls. Maybe there are some gaps as well that you might identify. So you need to, identify and then protect your assets. And then, so you need policies, procedures, and standards around those. And then you need, again, more policies and procedures around how to detect it. So you want continual monitoring. You want 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. How do you do that? Is that in-house, out-house? If you have third parties involved, then things get more complicated because then your contracts also have to reflect the risk tolerance of the organization. And of course, you need policies, procedures, and standards, but now you may also need contractual obligations between you and a third party, which requires a regular review. Maybe it's a monthly review That's usually what I do with my suppliers. Respond. And then you need some strategy on how to respond. Now, playbooks are obviously the best approach. Okay. Goes without saying, I think all cybersecurity leaders and professionals will agree. If you have playbooks and you create them based on what are the risks to the organization, that you're going to probably have a higher rate of success than the people that don't have playbooks. So any type of security event may require some kind of a triage, for instance, an investigation, and then determine if it's real or not, right? If it's real, then you move on to responding to it. So that's when you activate the playbook. Now, you may have some SLAs around that. You can see here we have a 15-minute acceptance for the ticket and 2-hour resolution. So there's a number of different people involved. Having a service desk set up so that you can use the cybersecurity program with it is really fundamental to, to creating a scalable solution that you can use on an enterprise that could span the globe. It could be in many, many continents. It could have many, many suppliers involved. And somehow electronically, you need to be able to communicate with people and so that everyone can get involved when they need to. And then, of course, there may be a failover as part of that event. And if that's true, then the failover site also has to have the same kind of configuration, policies, procedures, and standards, the same type of equipment so that there's no exposure from the risk side. So you need to look at this very carefully and set up the procedure. So this is operations, 101, right? And then, of course, recovery. And recovery, we are not talking about DRP or BCP necessarily, maybe a little bit of BCP, but definitely no DRP, because we live in a cloud world now. And almost all of my customers, and I'm sure you are too, are using the cloud. And when you have a cloud involved, then all of a sudden you have real-time, hot, live data that's being replicated in multiple instances around the globe in multiple data centers. So if one data center has a failure, let's say it's a disk drive failure, or let's say the data center goes away for some reason, then another data center automatically picks it up and runs. So the only thing that you need to do is make sure that you have resources and you have some kind of a service continuity plan if you follow the ITIL practices. 2 hours to return to steady state means that this is the team, this is the tail end of the playbook activation, is the getting back to normal business wherever you are. And normal business may entail just running operations out of a different location. If a site goes down in America, maybe you're going to fail over to the UK or Australia. Who knows, right? But those people in those locations need to know what to do. So you need to have that. And then you need to be able to come back once your site becomes available again. You need to be able to come back. And that's what recovery is all about. Now, of course, there's lessons learned. These lessons learned are so important to quality management, and a quality management system should definitely be part of any operations process. So these are the kinds of things that you would have to pay for in your operations budget. You would have to have the people and the resources in order to make this happen, right? This is so fundamental. And there's so many organizations now that have to be NIST cybersecurity compliant that this is exactly what your operational budget would be doing. Now, operations, if you look at it from a architectural perspective, this is a reference model used in architecture. We have identify, which plays the overarching role. Protect fits into that very nicely because protect is driven by what you identify. And then, of course, detection. So once we protect something, then we want to begin to monitor it automatically. So this is why we have monitoring up the side like this, detect. And then included in that would be sort of a little nest of respond and recover. And these are kind of the final stages. And even while those are going on, we're still doing some detection to make sure that everything's going as planned. Project charters, I mentioned, you want to create a capital budget, you need a project charter. Here's an example of a project charter. I'm going to give you some tips on what goes into this. Okay, so this is sort of the cover page. You see you have a sponsor, you have a leader, you have contact information, you have some dates, you have a title, and a type of project. And then below that you have some project objectives. This is part of the project definition, which takes us into here. So these are the different sections within most project management methodologies. I've written project management methodologies and had them ISO 9001 approved, by the way. So I know project management very, very well. And I've led over 100 projects, so obviously I've been practicing. So we have project objectives, we have project benefits, the strategy behind the project, and critical success factors. So what we must have in order to make it operate, to make it successful. Then we have deliverables. So we have overarching deliverables. Why are we doing this project? And then we might have some interim deliverables, some things, some quick wins, as we call them in the ITIL world. So quick wins are always nice because it helps to build confidence with the team and with the executives and the sponsors specifically. The sponsor likes to see some deliverables, especially key interim deliverables. If you can produce something right away, wow, fantastic. And then, of course, scope. Scope of the project is so important because you want to avoid something called scope creep, which can ruin your project. It could drag it down. It could kill the budget. It could, make it blow past its milestones. So scope creep is bad. But a lot of times you'll be surprised how many times I see this in a project when I'm running it. You get this beautiful project up and running. It's all approved. It's got a budget. And all of a sudden there's some managers in the organization that say, hey, I can benefit from that too. So why don't you bolt on the stuff that I need to do. So it's a lot of fun working in the corporate environment. Okay, back to what's inside the project charter. Okay, so there's parameters. So these are different sections. So there's project definition, project deliverables is a different section. Parameters. So these are important. Milestones, type of resource, skill set, effort, duration, target date, known constraints, beginning assumptions, and risk assessment. But this is a project risk assessment. Okay. Now the project could have a risk assessment to evaluate the risks of the assets. That could be part of the Gantt chart or the project plan. But in this case, we're just talking about the risk of the project to the organization or the risk of the success of the project. If you look at these first couple items here, like type of resource, skill set, effort, duration, and target date, these all become part of the resource plan, which we'll look at next. Project organizational impacts. Okay, so we have a project team. We have an issue resolution team. This is so important, not to escalate any issues, but be able to resolve it within the people and the stakeholders that are on the project. So any stakeholders that are going to be impacted should be on the issue resolution team. You may have some other players involved in that too. Could be internal audit, could be involved to help monitor things. Could be the CFO. Probably not the CEO, though. CEO is too busy. CFOs are pretty busy too, but there may be a few extra people on that team. Then the department's impact, as I mentioned, so they should definitely be, these are the stakeholders. Potential project priority. So is this an important project? Is this a project that's going to actually help the organization, the enterprise, achieve some of its tactical goals for the year or strategic goals? Will it drive toward the strategic goals, becoming more resilient, more tough? Maybe they want to go for IPO, right? Initial program offering. Maybe they want to be traded on the stock exchange. In order to do that, you have to pass some gates. And some of those gates include making sure that your operations are well documented and defined. So that may become a capital project. And then, of course, sign off, right? Oh, forgot to mention client responsibility. So important. So anybody that you're going to touch on that you might involve their department making changes, then you need to make sure that you define what it is that you expect from them. So this is not really a critical success factor, although it is sort of. But if you put it under critical success factor, then it's probably not very fair to the manager. It's better to just identify what their responsibilities are and then work with them on how to achieve those. And then a sign-off. And the sign-off by the PMO or by the executive will help get you on your way to your capital budget. Okay, so you may have multiple projects, okay, that you want to do over the next year. Okay, it's very important that you define those now, okay? So right now, the fiscal year ends on December 30th. It's November, early November, okay? You're already probably behind the 8 ball a little bit because I think the budgets will probably want to be approved by December 1st because a lot of people like to go on, holidays. They have Christmas and other types of holidays that they go on in December. So December is kind of a slack month. There may be a couple weeks completely missing. So waiting to get your budget approved and your strategic or your business plan approved in December is probably pushing it a little bit. You probably won't be successful if you try that. So ideally, if December 30th is your target date, then you probably want to start this in September or no later than October, right, to get it going. Again, you might have multiple projects. So you might have multiple project charters. You can have a project charter for firewall upgrades, disaster recovery, implementing Office 365. Same with asset management, a proper asset management system, not one done in spreadsheets. Vulnerability management, Microsoft Defender, advanced threat protection, might be a separate project. Maybe incident handling. Maybe you don't have a true blue incident handling practice. You need to get that up. 24/7 cybersecurity monitoring. You need monitoring because ears on the ground are the only way you're going to know that there's a threat coming, right? Identity and access management, privilege access management, cybersecurity program updates. This is more. This has to do with the operational side of things. I mean, all of these things will feed into operations, but these would all be capital budget, right? So all these projects would have resources. There may be some acquisitions or some purchases that need some maybe RFPs. They need money, right, to function. So you want to have this all planned out and all organized with all your project charters and put that into your strategic business plan. Now, I mentioned before there was a few items on the charter that feed into this resource planning. So understanding what the task is that needed to be completed, what type of resource you need to complete that task, and the skills involved are very important. So this would go into the recruitment process or the RFP process in order to hire the right people, the right company to help you. Or maybe you're recruiting internally and you want to allocate some people. So you need to look at the allocations of people to see if they're 100% allocated or 50%. If they're working on several projects, like every company has a few key people that know everything about everything, and they're on all the projects. But you want to ask for their time. You want to book their time. So this is where you do it. So you book it here, whatever the allocation is. How many hours do they need to spend on your project from the beginning to the end? And what is the duration? So in some cases, you might spend 16 hours, but maybe the duration is over 2 weeks. Maybe some of the changes that you need to make because of this project actually can't be implemented only through change windows, so not to disrupt the operation. Because, cybersecurity should never disrupt the operation. Cybersecurity is there to provide assurance and insurance to make sure that the operation goes smoothly and that there are no issues or any problems. So we provide a very valuable service to the organization. And then, of course, target dates. Target dates always have to be set because it's not so much of saying, okay, you did a really bad job, you missed your target date, but it's for us to learn afterwards too about what it is that we said we were going to do. And then, so we do that lessons learned thing and say, wow, could have done some better estimating, maybe. Okay, and then we get into the budget. Now, the budget has several sections. So this is the core or the operational side of it. So you have salaries of employees, you have a leader, you have a manager, you have an analyst, you might have help desk, or it could be a security operations center person. There's auditor, you might need forensics once in a while. Maybe you need a full-time, hopefully not, because if you have forensics full-time, that means that you have some problems that you have to solve, some big ones. And then there's a security governance committee. So having all those executives on your governance committee meeting, sitting around for an hour costs the company a lot of money. So you want to be able to account for that, right? And then you can see that this plan goes across here, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. So we are forecasting out for the full strategic term, and we're identifying what resources we need so that we can deal with this up front. So we have one analyst, one manager right across until we get to year 4, and then we're going to hire another analyst. Okay. And there's no other changes to this. Except for the auditor, right? So the auditor, we bring in a full-time auditor in the 4th year as well. So have a plan. Executives like to see this. The CEO and the CFO will love to see this. Another part to the budget, annual hardware and security costs. So as I mentioned before, a lot of the things that IT does actually impact cybersecurity. So, and you can look at the list here. It'll give you some ideas. So Splunk, so any kind of a SIEM tool, file integration monitoring, McAfee, SourceFire, closed circuit television. If you're doing physical security, it's combined and it's not property management taking care of it. It's the actual cybersecurity leader of the organization. Then you have to have that integration because there's a lot of physical security components. CCTV is one of them. Citrix, of course, helps to control access to information. So if you're working on a customer side or with a third party, you might want to control access, especially if you have to follow GDPR rules or any kind of privacy legislation, California Consumer Protection Act or the Canadian Consumer Protection Act. You need to safeguard the data from other people. And I've been a privacy and security compliance officer, and I can tell you there's a lot of things about protecting access to private information that a lot of companies have not even considered yet. And GDPR is going to push hard to try and get that realized. But we're a little ways away from that yet. So In a bank, you might have a hardware security module. This helps to manage all the encryption because there's a lot of encryption going on. Data loss prevention, you know what that's all about. It's about protecting those endpoints and also being able to detect when somebody's trying to exfiltrate data. And this could be a trigger to understanding that there is actually a cyber attack going on within your four walls. You don't even know about it. But the data loss prevention might be the trigger. Proximity cards, of course, another part of physical security. Firewall audit software, so you want to review your firewalls on a regular basis. Make sure there's nothing going on there that shouldn't be. Desktop encryption software. This usually becomes part of the endpoint protection as well as virus protection software and threat protection. So it's all part of the active threat protection kind of suite, if you like. Budget. Okay, we're continuing with the budget. Now we're going to talk about the contractors involved, so we might need some security consultants. We talked about the capital budgets, okay, and we might need some highly talented and skilled resources for a short period of time to help make our project hum along and complete on time. You might also need external auditors, or maybe you need to do some kind of annual consultation. So you come up with a budget on that. And again, it's year 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So hopefully, you know, your reliance on external resources becomes less and less, unless you're not going that way. Some people want to outsource everything. Outsource costs, physical security monitoring. So any kind of SOC, again, monitoring that might be bundled together and put in an RFP. Hardware security module testing, pardon me. Pen testing, security testing should always be going on. You might do some of that as part of your quality management team, or, before you do any kind of user acceptance testing. It might be wise to also run like a burp suite or something like that in order to check your applications if they're hanging out there on the internet. And also ad hoc testing. So, you know, whenever there's a major change or whenever there's some kind of investigation that's looking at some kind of potential vulnerability, you might want to, you know, repair it or fix it and test it, right, to make sure that it's fixed. All right. Now, all of this gets approved by the board. Thank you, board. We've done a very good job at preparing our report. We want to make this presentation to you. We hope that we will get your blessing on this report and be able to continue providing the excellent cybersecurity services that we have been delivering, as we can show you in our performance reporting. And thank you very much for your time. And then, so the idea is to, you know, be bright, be very intelligent about what you're talking about. You don't know, you might have some people on that board that know a lot more about cybersecurity than you do. So you want to be bright and you want to be brief. You don't want to say too much about things, because the more you talk about something and don't get to the point, it appears the less that you know about it, actually. So smart people get to the point quickly, and they're very bright about it. And then, of course, be gone. So if you're just coming to the board to make a presentation and then leaving, once it's done, take any questions and then exit. You might be invited to stay. So we're hoping that if you have a formal cybersecurity program and a plan that matches the strategic plan, that you will be a welcome addition to the board. Okay? Because it's obvious that you know what you're doing, you're experienced, and this is a key part of your success if you want to be a successful cybersecurity leader in any organization. It's about knowing how to plan and organize your cybersecurity program. And this annual tactical and strategic business plan goes a long, long way to prove that, because this is exactly what all the other executives sitting around you are doing every year, right? So they know when they see a good plan, they can respect that. And this is a good plan. So, okay. So you don't want to be a CISO or a cybersecurity leader that has empty pockets when it comes 2022 or any of the years following that. You want to be the CISO who has all the gold that he needs. And it doesn't have to be a big bucket of gold, but you need to have enough to achieve the goals that you've laid out and that everyone has agreed to. So the executives have agreed, the board has agreed. You want to make sure that your estimates are good. Put a little fudge factor in there. If you're a good project manager, you know what I'm talking about. And be successful, right? I wish you every success. And I hope that this presentation has helped you. And of course, if you have any questions at all, I'm available to help you anytime. You can contact me through LinkedIn, Facebook, my website. You can also check out some of my videos like this one will be posted on YouTube to help other people. And of course, there's my email address and phone number. Don't be shy. I hope you have a great day, and I want to thank you all for your attention and time. This has been a great presentation. Take care now.